So I'm just going to take you through the Synodal report that was published here in the Diocese where I am in Ballina, County Mayo. And if I'm reading it out and I feel and you hear that I'm frustrated, well, it can be very frustrating when you see that people don't know the faith. They don't know the faith. And that's the simple truth of it. I mean, where's my catechism? You know, have priests ever brought us through the catechism of the Catholic Church, sat people down and walked them through the catechism of the Catholic Church? What has been the constant teaching of the Catholic Church over 2,000 years, which hasn't changed in Vatican II? It's very, very sad. It's very, very sad. I mean, they're talking about overwhelmingly we should allow priests to get married. We should allow married priests and women deacons and all this. Does anyone think that that's going to cause a stampede of vocations into the Catholic Church? It hasn't worked in the Anglican Communion. And what would make you think it would work in the Catholic Church? I mean, the simple fact, it will never happen. It will never happen. It's not the tradition of the Catholic Church. And that's been the tradition of 2,000 years in East and West. I mean, it's incredibly sad to see this. And the priests that were involved in this process, did any of them not stand up and defend the faith that they believe in, to defend the vocation that they have been following? It just looks like it's been led by a bishop and a group of priests who don't love the faith, who haven't been happy with their faith. Imagine living all of your life unhappy. Where's the joy of the faith in that bishop and priests? They must have had no joy in their vocation over 30, 40, 50 years to lead that process through. I mean, you would think that the people that had lived celibacy, that had worked as priests, would be able to give a voice. And if they have been so unhappy over those so many years, why did they stay? Why stay? How can you live like that? You know, I've met many fulfilled and happy priests in my life, you know, really, really authentically happy, you know, completely enthralled with their vocation. And, you know, it's amazing how their parishes are different and the people that they know are different. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to be very clear. I don't know what's going on in the Catholic Church. As I said, I grew up in the era of John Paul II in the 1990s. I was, you know, fully embraced the spirit of Vatican II, fully embraced everything that John Paul II was teaching us, all the documents and so forth. And, you know, 20 years later, you'd wonder what has happened. What has happened? It's quite clear where this synodal process is heading in the Church. The Pope has a clear direction where he wants. He wants certain results. I think we can all deduct what are the results from this process if this is where it's going. It's a bit like the Irish Citizens Assembly. Let's do a Citizens Assembly to get a referendum on abortion. Yes, look, the Citizens of Assembly have approved it. You know, I mean, guys, you couldn't invent this. 29% of Catholics only go to Mass. I can guarantee you, 100%. If none of these things that I've mentioned there, as regards the hot button issues and all this, will increase participation. Why would you? Why would it? Has it done so in the Anglican Communion? No. I mean, guys, in the early church, the faith was known as a way, which was distinct from the way of the world. Ego eimi e odos. I am the way. Ego eimi he odos. I am the way. That's what Christ said. Ego eimi e odos. Kai aletheia kai zoe. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Our do we even know what that way is anymore? How can the way that the Christians have been following for 2,000 years suddenly be a way that is no longer something that we propose to people today? You know, when St. Paul was preaching in Corinth, preaching about this beautiful way, which it was called, before Christians were called Christians, what they were doing was called the way. Ego eimi odos. I am the way. They were following Christ. Christ had given them a way to follow, which was distinct from the world. You acted differently. It was a different way of living. It was a different way of encountering Christ. It was a different way of praying. So I do wonder, have anybody actually studied the way? You know, the neo-catechumens will talk about this a lot. El Camino in Spain is called El Camino, and you have El Camino de Santiago, which is an actual physical, and you have what the neo-catechumenal way founded by Kiko Arguello, they call it El Camino, the way. I think Jose Maria Escrivá has a book called The Way as well. Do we know the way so that we're able to lead people on the way? Or are we just going to invent the way of the world and say, look, this is what the world is doing now. Let's have the LGBTQ flags up in the church. Let's do a jazz night, and let's all, we've seen it, what they've done in Chicago. Put your hands up in the air and let's have a jazz night. Let's bring in a jazz band and bring in a few flags, and sure, we'll have a few drinks afterwards. Do you think that will renew the faith or renew the church? It's just going to divide it even more. There is the Catholic faith, the Christian faith is a way. There can only be one way to Christ, the way that he has left us in his Bible, in this word, in the tradition of the church. But then again, who am I? Maybe those who have studied this far better than me can precisely tell us, what do the words ego, eimi, odos actually mean? I am the way. What does that actually mean? What is that way that Christ left us? Does it change with every century? Does it change? Is it open to democracy, to popular opinion? What is it? Anyway, let's see. So I'm just going to read through this, and I do apologize if I sound frustrated, but it's just I just find this very sad, because it's just a copy and paste of the Anglican Communion. But then anyway, sure, look, we have to pray. God bless. Take care. Bye bye. So I just thought I'd take you through the synodal pathway in the Killala Diocese. This is the diocese where I live in Ireland for the last 20 years, actually, since I moved here in 2003. It's a diocese above Galway and the west of Ireland. And so I just thought I should take you through what has come out of this synodal process so that people can see where we're heading in this particular diocese. So the diocese is headed by Bishop John Fleming. Here's some of the content so you can see: introduction, incredible start, survey, what do we need to do now, what do we need to stop doing, what topics would you recommend for the upcoming diocesan assembly, surprising issues that emerged, a unique occasion, the how question, next step, fruits, spirit of work, team leaders, get in touch. So it seems to be 20 pages document. Introduction. The synodal process in Killala Diocese has followed a different trajectory than other dioceses, in that a process of dialogue with the laity and religious had already been completed prior to the announcement of the national and worldwide process. When the process was initiated by Pope Francis, it was decided that it was unnecessary for the diocese to revisit a stage already recently completed. In 2017, the priests of the Killala Diocese, though not all were supportive, decided that they would ask the people what they wanted. They would work with them in making it happen, and they would reassure them that the priest would support them. The process was called placing hope in faith, in deference to the centrality of both faith and hope in its provenance. A credible start. In order to get things started, a steering group was established in February 2017. Each deanery was represented by 2 women, 1 layman and a priest, and co-opted with Bishop Fleming and a priest coordinator. In all, 18 members, 8 lay women, 4 laymen, 5 priests and Bishop Fleming. Almost immediately a problem arose. Was the agenda open? Was everything up for discussion? What about hot button issues like the ordination of women, mandatory clerical celibacy and LGBTQ plus teaching? A distinction was drawn between what changes the diocese could implement and what were the prerogative of the Universal Church. While this distinction was accepted by the committee, the dilemma was that if the agenda was not open when approaching the general public, then the process would have little credibility. The problem was resolved when Bishop Fleming gave a commitment that whatever was decided that was within the authority of the diocese to implement would be diocesan policy, and that what was beyond the authority of the diocese to change, he would bring to the Irish bishops, who would send to the papal nuncio to forward to Pope Francis. In September 2017, the committee, having accepted the undertakings given by the bishop, undertook an analysis of priest numbers in a mass attendance survey. The first indicated that within less than 2 decades there would be 7 or so priests for 22 parishes in the diocese, with the vast majority in their late 60s and 70s. The second, based on head count on 3 successive weekends, concluded that religious practice in the sense of attendance at weekly masses was around 29%. And so here you have a photo of Bishop Fleming meeting the 3,000 parish delegates at the Diocesan Assembly in 2018 before the pandemic. Survey. In November, the committee decided that a survey would be undertaken in every parish to elicit the opinion of people and that its results would be voted on in a diocesan gathering or assembly. It was agreed that the survey would have to be anonymous and confidential. By December, the committee had agreed on the survey 7 open-ended questions that were: where in your everyday life do you experience love, truth, goodness, hope and joy? What is it that encourages you to participate in the life of your local church and parish? What is it that you find difficult about participating in the life of your local church parish? As a church, what is the biggest problems we face? What do you need to do now? What do we need to stop doing now? What topics would you recommend for the upcoming diocesan assembly? In 2018, the Placing Hope and Faith survey was launched by Bishop Fleming, who strongly encouraged participation from every parish. In February, to publicise the survey, the committee held meetings in every parish with parish pastoral councils and their priests, and from then until April, survey sheets were distributed in every parish. For the survey to reach the gold standard of credibility, that it would be real, respectful and transparent, it was clear that it would have to be anonymous and confidential in order to elicit as truthful a picture as possible, and that it would be open to anyone in every parish apart from young children. Surveys and their accompanying envelopes in which a completion the surveys were individually sealed were distributed widely in every parish through PPCs where they existed, and where they did not exist through other agencies. The survey was widely publicised and was also made available for completion online. In total, 1,457 completed questionnaires were returned, and we have no idea who these people were. There was no vetting of their identities. Adult surveys comprising of 1,101 and young people surveys 3,356. Again, it's like a Twitter survey. You have no idea who's voting behind this. So, As the surveys were anonymously completed, it's impossible to have a profile of those who completed them in terms of assessing whether they reflected the opinions of regular churchgoers, members of religious congregations, groups who may have felt marginalised, or indeed those who were estranged. Equally, there is no data on those who didn't avail of the opportunity to express their opinion, although some have subsequently said it was because they felt it was only going to be more of the same and they feared nothing would change. Imagine this. Imagine a process where you have no idea what people are saying. You have no idea. There is no, it's like a Twitter survey. They might as well just put it on Twitter and let people come back and say, well, let's have an idea here what you want. It's a great tactic of the left, to do these type of things, to manage the survey. In May, in order to underline the importance of accurately surfacing the data that emerged from the survey and ensuring that its processing and analysis was undertaken by a reputable, independent, professional agency, they spent money to send it to Kerry. You couldn't invent this. In June, the report produced by GIAR in Kerry was sifted into 129 proposals under 14 areas of interest in no particular order: general, family, youth, women in the church, lay participation, management of parishes, child safeguarding, education in the faith, pastoral care and priests, vocations, prayer, liturgy, deacons, inclusion. While these were the general overall areas of interest to emerge, an insight into the priorities and respondents can be gained by considering the breakdown of answers of question number 5, what do we need to do now? And question number 6, what do we need to stop doing now? The top 10 answers in each case are listed below, broken into adult and youth responses. The prevalence of the aforementioned hot button issues is particularly notable. The top most frequent responses: youth appeal to encourage, include, women increase roles, celibacy abolish, participation enable, encourage, education, faith and formation, prayer, children's masses, listen more, religion in school, parish councils strengthen. Among youth appeal, encourage, attract, modernize, change. God, if we could, how much more modernizing do we need to do? Celibacy abolish. I mean, none of these kids have ever been a priest. It's amazing. Mass improve, make more interesting, but most of them don't go to mass. Women increase role, accept everyone, relate more to people, listen, discussion, dialogue, openness, vocations increase from young people. Interesting. Hasn't been a vocation here in years. Embrace gay people. Question 6: what do we need to stop doing now? Ignoring women. I didn't know they were ignored. Old-fashioned mentality, being judgmental, negativity, complaining, dictatorship, hiding past atrocities, celibacy for priests, boring homilies, excluding gay people. I didn't know they were excluded. I didn't know there was a sign above the door, no gay people allowed in the church. Never heard that before. It's amazing. Catechism of the Catholic Church doesn't say if you're gay you're excluded from the Catholic Church. It's not anywhere. Don't know why some people have that idea, but sure, anyway, that's life. Money, talking about it, asking for it, announcing collections. Among youth, judging people, mass being boring, anti-LGBT practices, old-fashioned, closed mind, celibacy, discrimination, exclusion, making up people's minds, being against abortion, hiding past atrocities, forcing people to believe, we're forced to believe. Question 7: what topics would you recommend for the upcoming diocesan assembly? The answers to question 7, asking those surveyed to recommend topics for the diocesan assembly, were summarized into top 10 issues of all respondents as represented in the table below: women, youth, attendance, engagement, celibacy, married clergy, priesthood, community role, overseas and deacons, inclusion in general, participation, vocations, abortion and protection of life. I don't know how some people want abortion and others want to protect life. It's amazing. mass education on in the faith for all ages. After the survey results were processed, we had a list of 129 proposals which represented the views of the people on what needed to happen in 14 different categories. We now needed to process by which the 129 proposals could be voted on to establish how in each category the proposals could be prioritised. In other words, in what order they might be implemented to establish a credible decision-making process to achieve them. 300 delegates from 22 parishes were chosen by their PPCs, and together with the priests of the diocese as well as representatives of other church groupings like the Jesuits, they gathered in Ballina in July 2018 for the first diocesan assembly. Bishop Fleming welcomed the delegates and outlined the work of the day. And here we can go through everything that Bishop Fleming mentioned. And the decline in priests. After that, the Assembly has reported on its conclusions, focus groups to be established with interested and skilled personnel that will help implement the decisions of the Assembly. That after the Assembly has reported on its conclusions, moderators be appointed to each focus group to drive the operation by gathering a group of people interested in particular subject areas and by taking responsibility for meetings, discussions, liaising with members, parishes and dioceses. That a diocesan team be appointed to oversee the operation of the focus group. The listening ethos be given an ongoing permanent structure status in the diocese, allowing a respectful platform to the voice of the people. Unless you're traditionalist, you won't get in there. Those who are traditional minded don't seem to be able to get in there, even priests. And it's quite obvious looking at what happened, the amount of priests who didn't go along with this charade. That transparency, inclusivity and consensus should be accepted as foundation stones in the diocesan and parish policies and concerns. That LGBT parishioners be made feel welcome and accepted in our parishes and dioceses. That because it is a source of anger, frustration for many Catholics, and because it is bringing the church into disrepute, we call churches authorities to deal with issues of priests who have been silenced because they expressed opinions in accordance to their conscience, opinions being expressed by this assembly. Tony Flannery's and so forth, Association of Catholic Priests. That in the future management of parishes and dioceses, a committee be established to examine the financial and other implications and report on the following: support for parish administration in the absence of priests, increased demands in 3 key areas: child safeguarding, data protection, charities, legislation, religious education in primary and secondary schools, communication strategy of the diocese, adult faith formation, youth programs, the disposal of parish properties no longer needed, so they're going to start selling those off, the alienation of parish property to local interest groups. Father Eamon Boyle responding to the launch of the Synodal pathway. The vocations section and the inclusion section were divided into 2. Vocations 1, Vocations 2. Proposals in regard to vocations and inclusion were not within the authority of the bishop or the people to implement, were placed in vocations or inclusion. Examples of issues falling into the category which attracted huge support were that priests should be allowed to marry, married priests be allowed to return to ministry, and that women be ordained. In response to question 7, what are the topics you would like to see on the agenda of the diocesan seminary? Decoupling the priesthood from the requirement of celibacy was the proposal most mentioned. It's amazing the amount of people that are not priests are able to give their opinion on this, and the ordination of women came second. In addition, under the heading of inclusion was the call for the church's teaching on homosexuality and those excluded from the church be changed. Who's excluded from the church, I wonder? I don't ever see in the catechism saying a particular person is excluded from the church. Not in the catechism, but it goes to show these priests aren't catechized themselves, so they weren't able to stand up and preach what the faith was. Amazing, isn't it? Who is excluded from the church? be changed to reflect the inclusion of all people regardless of sexual orientation, marital status, or family status. Proposals that could be implemented by Bishop and the people were then placed in Vocations 2 or Inclusion 2. Surprising issues that emerged. The delegates' response to some of the issues beyond the diocese's capacity to implement, on which they registered their opinions. Priests be allowed to marry. 85% yes, 1% against. Amazing, these priests, people that have no idea what the priesthood is. And the priests that were at this, none of them stood up and said, well, I value my priesthood and my commitment to the Lord and the celibacy. It's amazing. Nobody stood up. Nobody in that. No priest, the bishop, stood up to give their views on this. It's quite incredible. They just sit back silent. I find this amazing. That priests who have married return to active ministry. Agree 81%, disagree 19%. Right. Most priests that have left active ministry, that have moved on, that have a job, are not interested in returning. That the church's teaching on homosexuality and those excluded from the church be changed to reflect the inclusion of all people regardless of sexual orientation, marital status, or family status. Agree 86% and disagree 14%. There is nothing in the catechism to say a person is excluded from the church. Nobody. There is no person excluded from the Catholic Church. What excludes us from the union of Christ is how we act in life, not your existence as a human being. If you're a baptized human being, you are in the church. And the catechism has never, there's nothing in the catechism to say X, Y, and Z person is excluded from the Catholic Church. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing how badly catechized the people in this place were. Women be ordained to the priesthood, 69%, 31% against, even though Pope John Paul II has issued a dogmatic degree he's reaffirmed the dogmatic teaching of the Catholic Church on that the priesthood is only for men. It's amazing that the priests weren't able to stand up and teach the Catholic faith. The second highest finding in the survey prior to the assembly was that the mandatory ban on ordination of women be lifted. Indeed, running through the survey results in the answers to different questions were comments repeated over and over again on the need to ensure that women are given due respect in the Catholic Church. Oh, so it seems that if you're not, unless you're ordained, you haven't been given due respect. Well, I'm not ordained. Have I not been given due respect? It's amazing. So it seems you'll only be given due respect if you're ordained in the church. That's quite incredible. But then again, we're in a diocese where the faith hasn't been taught, where it seems the priests aren't willing to teach the faith. And it's amazing the amount of priests who refused in the diocese to engage in this process. It's a charade. While women often take up the burden of responsibility for the life of the church at the parish level, the survey indicated deep-seated unease that a church not open to the gifts of all the baptized was losing the hearts and minds of Catholic women. There was a sense that many women have already drifted away from the church, and that unless progress is made in respecting the equal rights of women, that the drift will continue. Concerns were expressed too of a perceived ethos of misogyny and a negative legacy over the years. The role of women in the church was central to the findings of our survey and regarded as an issue that needed to be dealt with. Now, that women be ordained to the diaconate, 80% to 20% disagree. That the ministry of the diaconate should be considered if women are allowed to be candidates as well as men. As a male-only diaconate has the potential to add another layer of male clericalism and alienate women further was a significant finding from the survey outlined earlier and reflected again in the subsequent assembly. I mean, it's copy-paste Anglican synod. Copy-paste. Absolutely no different. You might as well just went over to the UK and copied it over. It's absolutely done nothing to renew the Anglican faith, the Anglican communion. No, nothing. Won't engage any more people. The volume of responses in favour of the above issues was significant given the profile of attendees who could mainly be said to be of a traditional mould. The manner in which they represented the voice of the people on the margins demonstrated a very strong awareness of the issues, which concern many who have walked away, no longer practiced or felt there was no point in engaging with the process. Yeah, I can understand. You haven't taught the faith. You haven't taught the faith. It's very, very sad. Very extremely sad. The unique question. The Diocesan Assembly was a unique occasion, a historic day for the diocese, with, for the first time in history, a gathering of people, priest and bishop, together setting the agenda and marking out the ground for a way forward in faith and in hope, determined to create and sustain the momentum needed to move the diocese and the parishes on a synodal pathway into the future. It was also a clear statement that the sacrament of baptism was, as the Second Vatican Council stated, an equalising and determining factor between parishioners and priests in terms of parish management, triumphed the early priority of ordination. Just as the priesthood for all the baptized in Vatican II speak means that it is not just the priest who celebrates the Eucharist, but all the baptized who celebrate with him. The gathering of the Diocesan Assembly was a public statement representing our belief that every baptized person has both the right and responsibility to exercise a joint leadership in our local church. If you don't go to Mass, there's no leadership. I despair. To continue the emphasis on confidentiality, because remember, all of this was put together by an anonymous survey. We've no idea who responded or how many responses somebody could have done. And to ensure that the process was completely private, an independent firm was contracted to supply a system of electronic voting when, on Assembly Day, the delegates were asked to prioritise 5 to 6 proposals to be implemented in order to preference each category. Each delegate keyed in his own preference, and seconds the results appeared on the screen. Thus, the voting was both private and confidential. Sorry, this is the second wave of voting. And confidential, with parishioners seated beside parish priests, each voting privately and independently. Among the general principles voted on by the Assembly were that the listening ethos be given an ongoing and structured status in the diocese, allowing a respectful platform for the voice of the people. I mean, we couldn't get Mass. I couldn't get Mass here when the government allowed it back in 2020, in July. And I was told, step back, Robert, by the local parish. Don't get involved. Don't get involved. Even though we're all working up in the factory, 12-hour shifts, we couldn't have Mass here. So, it's all very well, priests, bishops, and talking about a listening process and listening ethos. But when you're shoved away in this parish, the transparency, inclusivity, and consensus be accepted as a foundation stones in diocesan and parish policies and concerns, that the role of the church in bringing the community together be respectful through community building initiatives organised by PCs. The how question. With the Diocesan Assembly, we have determined that the people of the diocese want to see happen under 10 different headings, as well as an order in which they wanted the proposals to be implemented. The next question was to determine how that implementation was to take place. So there was 10 focus groups involving 120 people who addressed the implementation. Some of the groups. I'll post a link here so people can read it. The Education and Faith Study Group. Fruit Spirit at Work. As we prepare for the next stage of synodal journey, the following are some of the considerable fruits of the process to date. Rekindling and reowning the vision of the Second Vatican Council. Re-establishing hope in the future of the Church. Sense of the Spirit inspiring the process. Early dilemmas resolved. Openness to change. Confidentiality survey. Confidence in the ability of the diocese to follow the synodal pathway. Confidence in parishes through PPC elections and training and energy generated for the future, however problematic and challenging it might be. Confidence in the diocese and working through the creative and even prophetic ways of resolving problems. Hundreds have engaged with the process. energy and the momentum it brought. Increased level engagement through laity and clergy. Link established between synodal team and pastoral council. Learning to walk together. Quality of commitment. Sense of reality. Okay. So this is journeying together. Team leaders. And get in touch. Okay.